The sun had barely kissed the rooftops of the old family compound when Adana stepped through the carved wooden gate, her silk wrapper rustling with each confident stride. She was beautiful, everyone agreed. Tall, slender, with eyes that seemed to measure the world and declare it inferior. But beauty, as the elders whispered, was only a window. It could hide storms. Adana had married Chike 3 months ago, and today was her first full morning in his family home. The house, a sprawling compound of ochre walls and red-tiled roofs, belonged to Mama Uche, a woman whose presence seemed to seep into every corner. Mama Uche was stern, with a gaze that weighed and measured, a woman whose hands had raised not only Chike, but generations before him. "Good morning, Mama Uche," Adana said with a small, practiced smile. Her voice was sweet, but it carried a note of impatience she did not notice. She did not bow fully, did not lower herself in the traditional way. She had learned many of the customs during visits before the wedding, but respect, she felt, was optional if you knew your worth. "Good morning, my child," Mama Uche replied, her voice calm, almost like water pooling in a deep river, steady, inevitable. She looked Adana up and down, noting the expensive beads on her wrists and the newness of her shoes, as if measuring her spirit against her outward appearance. Adana noticed the scrutiny, but ignored it. She had not come to this home to bow or bend to anyone. She had come to start her new life, to claim her place. And she had plans, big ones. Chike, handsome and devoted, would do anything she asked. She did not yet understand that some chains in a household were invisible and stronger than any man's will. The morning began with chores that Adana found beneath her. She scowled silently as she was shown the kitchen, the way Mama Uche peeled yams and ground pepper with a patience that was almost sacred. "You will learn," Mama Uche said, her words soft but carrying a weight that made Adana flinch slightly. Adana nodded politely, but did not absorb the meaning. She had her own ideas of convenience, of efficiency, of luxury. She did not see the small lessons hidden in the mundane, the traditions designed to test patience and humility. She did not yet know that the very key to the joy she sought, motherhood, lay not in rushing or resisting, but in honoring the woman who had nurtured her husband. By midday, Adana had made her first mistake without realizing it. She criticized the food, too bland, too simple, and offered suggestions with the confidence of someone accustomed to be obeyed. Mama Uche, unshaken, simply nodded. "You will taste it again. You may yet understand its worth." But Adana did not hear the warning in the words. She only heard the tone, the seeming stubbornness of a woman she deemed old-fashioned. And so, as she left the kitchen and walked to the courtyard, she did so with a sense of triumph, unaware that the day had already begun a series of quiet reckonings that would test her patience, humility, and ultimately her heart. In the courtyard, the wind whispered through the palm fronds, as if carrying the murmurs of generations past. Adana laughed softly to herself, brushing off the feeling. The house, she thought, would bend to her will eventually. She did not yet know that some lessons could not be rushed, and that respect, above all, was not a courtesy, but a key. The sun rose the next day with a golden glow that seemed almost cruel to Adana. She awoke in her new room, luxurious and spacious, yet her thoughts were already restless. The previous day's chores, Mama Uche's quiet lessons, and the strange heaviness in the house gnawed at her. How could simple food, simple rules, and simple respect matter so much? She had married Chike. Surely that was enough to secure her position. Downstairs, the morning began as it always did. Mama Uche moved with a rhythm that was both commanding and invisible, tidying, sweeping, tending the garden and preparing breakfast. Adana entered the kitchen, her nose held high, and announced she would help, though only on her own terms. "I'll make tea," she said,
selecting the finest leaves from the cabinet. But you must let me do it my way. Your methods are slow. Mama Uche's eyes narrowed just slightly. Slow, perhaps, but careful, she replied. Her voice had no anger, only a quiet certainty, as if time itself supported her judgment. Adana rolled her eyes, thinking of the efficient ways she had learnt in her own home. She ignored Mama Uche's comment and set about her tea with exaggerated motions, dropping some leaves on the floor in her haste. Chike, arriving with a sleepy yawn, watched silently. He wanted to intervene, but the tension in the room made him hesitant. By the afternoon, the cracks between Adana and Mama Uche began to widen. Adana complains that the yams were undercooked, the sauce too oily, the firewood poorly arranged. Each remark, though polite in tone, carried the sharpness of judgment. And Mama Uche only smiled faintly, nodding and saying, "You will learn, my child. Everything has its place." The household began to feel strange. Adana noticed the fire sputtered despite careful tending. Water spilled inexplicably while she drew it from the well. Even Chike seemed distracted, dropping tools and tripping over small things. Adana scowled, blaming the clumsiness on the old house and its routines. She did not yet connect the mishaps to her own attitude. That evening, a neighbor came to greet the family. "Good evening, Mama Uche," she said politely. Then, turning to Adana, she whispered with a hint of knowing amusement, "Young lady, they say the hat you give to your mother-in-law is the hat that opens the door to your children." Adana laughed, brushing off the words. "Children? I've only just arrived," she said, though a tiny flicker of unease stirred in her chest. The neighbor smiled faintly and left a strange mystery lingering in the air. That night, as Adana lay in her bed, she found herself restless. The room, once comforting, now felt heavy, as if shadows were pressing against the walls. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of the garden where Mama Uche had planted herbs and flowers long before Adana arrived. She dismissed it as imagination, but deep down, a small, uneasy voice whispered, "Respect, kindness, care, these were not mere traditions." The next few days followed the same pattern. Adana criticized, Mama Uche endured, and small accidents seemed to trail her. A pot of soup boiled over without warning. A freshly cleaned floor became wet again for no reason. Even Chike fell ill with a mild fever after an unusually stressful day. Adana's pride prevented her from seeing the connection, and she blamed everything except her own attitude. Yet, Mama Uche watched quietly. She said nothing overt, but her eyes followed every action, and her calm presence seemed to pulse through the house. She knew that pride and arrogance were blind, and that lessons often came only when the heart was ready to receive them. By the end of the week, Adana felt trapped between her own desires and the household she could not bend to her will. She began to wonder if there was some invisible rule governing the house, a rule she had yet to understand. She did not realize that the rule had already begun to affect her, testing her patience, humility, and ultimately her readiness to embrace the life she sought. The following morning, Adana awoke with a mild sense of irritation she could not shake. The sun streamed through her window, painting the walls gold. But instead of feeling warmth, she felt the subtle pressure of expectation pressing on her chest. She had begun to notice that life in Mama Uche's house did not bend to her whims. Small mishaps continued. A basket of tomatoes toppled while she carried it. A jug of water leaked unexpectedly, and even her mirror seemed to fog as if mocking her. Determined to assert herself, she stormed into the kitchen where Mama Uche was quietly kneading dough for fufu. "Why is it that no matter what I do, things go wrong in this house?" Adana demanded, her voice sharper than intended. Mama Uche did not flinch. She simply looked at Adana, her eyes calm yet penetrating, as if seeing through every layer of pride and pretense. "My child," she said softly, "there are things in life that cannot be rushed, controlled, or commanded. You will learn, in time, that some doors open only with the right key." Adana frowned. "Doors? Keys? What are you talking about? I came here to start a family, not to follow riddles and old superstitions." Mama Uche let out a quiet laugh, not mocking, but knowing. "Superstitions, perhaps, or wisdom. You see, a household is like a living tree. It thrives on respect, care, and harmony. If one branch is cruel or careless, the tree suffers." Adana rolled her eyes. "So you mean my bad moods make the tree, this house, suffer? That's absurd." "You are young," Mama Uche replied gently, "and you do not yet see that the ways of life are often hidden in the smallest actions. A daughter-in-law who honors her mother-in-law nurtures the family. She also nurtures herself in ways she cannot yet imagine." Adana's face flushed with impatience. "I am trying to do my best, and yet nothing goes right. I don't understand why you insist on—" She broke off mid-sentence as Mama Uche's words sank into her mind, though she tried to resist their meaning. Later that day, Chike returned from work bringing his usual cheerful energy. He tried to lighten the atmosphere, but even he could not ignore the subtle tension that had been building in the house. That evening, as they all sat down to eat, Adana noticed a strange look in Mama Uche's eyes, kind yet expectant. "My dear," Mama Uche began, her voice calm, "you have asked why children do not come easily to some. There is a truth you must understand. The heart with which a woman treats her mother-in-law often opens or closes the door to motherhood." Adana blinked, certain she had misheard. "You mean the way I treat you affects whether I can have children?" Mama Uche nodded, her expression serene. "Yes, not in anger or in fear, but in care, respect, and understanding. Life's blessings are often tied to the relationships we honor, even when we do not understand them fully." Adana's mind whirled. She had never heard such a thing, and yet something deep inside her stirred. A sense of unease, a recognition of her own missteps. She thought of the spilled water, the toppled tomatoes, the fumbled chores, and even Chike's small illnesses. Could it really be possible that her attitude toward Mama Uche was influencing her life in ways she had ignored? That night, Adana lay awake thinking about the woman she had dismissed, criticized, and undermined. For the first time, she felt the weight of her actions, the pride that had blinded her. Something shifted within her, a small, hesitant understanding that perhaps respect was not just tradition, but a key she had overlooked. Outside, the wind whispered through the garden, rustling the leaves like a gentle reminder. Somewhere deep in her heart, Adana felt the first stirrings of change. A door had been opened, and she sensed that beyond it lay a path she had yet to walk.
The dawn broke slowly over the compound, as if reluctant to witness the change that was about to unfold. Adana awoke with a quiet unease, the memory of Mama Uche's words echoing in her mind. She remembered the neighbors' whispered advice, the strange mishaps in the house, and the gentle revelation of the previous evening. The realization settled heavily on her chest. Her behavior toward her mother-in-law might hold the key to the life she longed for. It was not easy. Old habits die hard, and Adana had spent years believing that confidence and charm could command respect and obedience. But now, faced with the tangible consequences of her pride, she felt the first stirrings of humility. "Good morning, Mama Uche," she said softly, entering the kitchen. She bowed slightly, unsure if her gesture was enough. Mama Uche's eyes twinkled with quiet amusement, but she said nothing, merely returned the greeting. The first trial came quickly. Mama Uche asked Adana to help in the garden, planting vegetables for the family's meals. The work was hard and unfamiliar. Adana's hands blistered, and the sun scorched her back. At first, she grumbled inwardly, thinking of her beauty and refinement. But then she remembered the words about respect and care. She straightened, wiped the sweat from her brow, and walked alongside her mother-in-law, asking questions, listening, and following her guidance. "Not like that," Mama Uche said at one point, showing Adana the proper way to plant the seeds.
Patience, my child. You must nurture, not force. Adana nodded, swallowing her pride. Yes, Mama, she said, her voice quieter than usual, but sincere. Days passed, and Adana's efforts continued. She learned to cook with care rather than haste, to sweep the floors meticulously, to serve Chike meals with warmth instead of criticism. She asked Mama Uche about family traditions, listening intently to stories of her husband's childhood, the lessons of her ancestors, and the subtle wisdom woven into daily routines. Yet, the path was not without trials. A sudden rainstorm flooded the courtyard one afternoon, washing away the freshly planted seeds. Adana felt frustration bubbling within her. All my work is ruined, she cried. Mama Uche placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. The work is not ruined, my child. The lesson is still here. Patience, humility, and care are seeds themselves. They take time to grow. Adana bit her lip, resisting the impulse to argue, and instead helped rebuild the beds. Each small setback became a lesson in resilience, each mistake a chance to practice care. Even Chike noticed the change. Where Adana had once snapped at him or ignored his suggestions, now she asked for his help, shared laughter over minor mishaps, and included him in her daily routines. Slowly, the household atmosphere began to shift. Meals were prepared with care, the floors stayed clean, and even the animals seemed calmer under her gentler touch. One evening, as the family sat together, Mama Uche spoke quietly. I see the change in you, Adana. You have begun to understand that respect is not about fear or duty, but about love and harmony. That understanding opens doors, my child, doors that lead to life's blessings. Adana felt a warmth spread through her chest, mingling with relief and humility. She had begun to change, not for appearances or reward, but because she recognized the truth in Mama Uche's wisdom. She still had much to learn, and she knew that life would test her further, but she was ready to face those trials with sincerity. As she prepared for bed that night, Adana whispered a quiet promise to herself. She would honor Mama Uche, nurture the household, and embrace the lessons she had resisted for so long. Somewhere deep inside, she felt a subtle shift, a seed of hope taking root, fragile but determined. Outside, the moon cast silver light across the courtyard, illuminating the garden where Adana had labored so earnestly. For the first time, she felt that her actions, small though they were, might truly shape the future she desired. And in the quiet night, she sensed that the blessings she sought, motherhood, harmony, and love, were beginning to stir, waiting for her to continue walking the path she had finally chosen. The household woke one bright morning to the gentle hum of life that had been absent for months. Birds chirped from the tall palm trees, the garden flourished under Adana's careful hands, and even the old walls of the compound seemed to glow with a newfound warmth. Adana, rising early as she had learned to do, felt a calm in her chest she had never known before. She moved quietly through the courtyard, feeding the chickens and checking the vegetables, her hands steady, her heart light. Mama Uche watched from the veranda, a faint smile on her lips. She had seen this transformation unfold, the slow, deliberate shift of pride into humility, impatience into care, arrogance into understanding. The daughter-in-law who had once mocked the household's rhythms had become a part of its heartbeat. "Good morning, Mama Uche," Adana said, bowing slightly as she approached. "Good morning, my child," Mama Uche replied, her voice soft but carrying the weight of satisfaction. "You have walked a difficult path. You have learned patience, care, and respect. Now life will meet you halfway." Adana's brow furrowed. "Life?" she asked. Mama Uche nodded. "Yes, the doors you sought, the doors of family, motherhood, and harmony are beginning to open. But remember, They open only to those who walk the path sincerely. Days turned into weeks, and the harmony in the household deepened. Chike, who had once tried to shield Adana from the household's invisible lessons, now watched her with quiet admiration. The couple worked together in the kitchen, tended the garden side by side, and shared laughter where once there was tension. Adana's heart had softened, her pride tempered by the knowledge that love and respect, not force or will, sustained a family. Then, one morning, as Adana and Mama Uche prepared breakfast together, a gentle knock came at the door. It was the village midwife, a kind woman who had known the family for years. She smiled warmly at Adana. "Good news, my child. I came to tell you that your heart and home are ready for the blessings you sought." Adana's eyes widened, and she felt a surge of emotions: relief, joy, gratitude, and awe. She realized in that moment the full meaning of Mama Uche's words, the harmony she had nurtured, the respect she had given, and the love she had learned to show were not only transforming the household, but were also opening the door to motherhood itself. Weeks later, as she rested in the garden, feeling a new life stir within her, Adana reflected on her journey. She thought of the spilled water, the toppled tomatoes, the harsh words she had spoken in pride, and the quiet, patient guidance of Mama Uche. She understood now that blessings in life were rarely earned through power or beauty. They were earned through care, humility, and the willingness to honor those who had walked before. Mama Uche came to sit beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You see, my child," she said softly, "life's treasures are hidden in the heart's smallest actions. You honored me, and in doing so, you honored yourself." Tears welled in Adana's eyes, but they were tears of understanding, gratitude, and peace. She had finally unlocked the secret she had ignored for so long. Respect and care were the keys, and they opened doors that wealth, beauty, and willpower could not. From that day forward, the house thrived in harmony. Adana continued to nurture the household with love and patience. Mama Uche guided with quiet wisdom, and Chike marveled at the transformation of the home and the woman he loved. And as the seasons passed, the garden blossomed, the hearth glowed warmly, and a new life grew within Adana, a living testament to the power of respect, care, and harmony. The wicked daughter-in-law had become a wise and loving mother-in-law in the making, not because of wealth, charm, or beauty, but because she had learned the true lesson: to honor those who nurture, and in doing so, to nurture the life she wished to bring into the world. The house sang with life, laughter, and hope, a melody composed by patience, respect, and love. And Adana, who once thought she could bend the world to her will, finally understood that the greatest power lay in the heart.